see, just make.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, great. I think we're going. Hi, my name is Michael Dobson, and I'm the president and CEO of the Dream Foundation, and we're here just to kind of have a conversation with Mr. David Bellamy, who is a candidate for the City Commission of Tallahassee, seat 3. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to kind of introduce you to Mr. Bellamy. And in full disclosure, what I would tell you is that I met Mr. Bellamy several months ago, at a NAACP event, in Tallahassee. And at that meeting, we talked for a very long time, actually. And I was pretty, impressed with the things that he talked about, and the opponent he's running against is, frankly, someone who I consider a friend, and I've talked with him a variety of times, and I share a lot of the values that he that he bring to the commission as well, and David's never run for office before. And I thought this was a really good opportunity to let the voters of Leon County know more about David, and just to kind of get a sense of who he is and why he's chose to get involved in this process. And I'm someone who's been involved in the political process for quite some time, and I certainly recognize how difficult it is to make the decision to jump into a political campaign. And we all complain about things all the time, and it's just so easy to just kind of sit at home and just kind of throw spitballs at the television or what have you, and just complain. But David has decided to jump into this race, and I thought this was a wonderful opportunity for voters to get to know him. And David, if you can just kind of tell the voters in Leon County a little bit about yourself and what prompted you to get involved in this this kind of political arena, if you will.
Well, my mother was the mayor here in the 80s and late 70s, Mayor Commissioner Carol Bellamy. And seeing her do it, seeing the interaction with citizens, seeing what serving your community meant, I always kind of thought I might run one day, maybe when I retired. I became a police officer after I graduated from high school, and was a police officer in Tallahassee and served the city, and then followed my father's footsteps and became a doctor. And now I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I've served the city as a doctor for 20 years. My dad did for 40. So serving the city's been a big part of my life since I joined the Police Explorers at 14. I thought I'd run maybe for election once I retired. I thought I might try to self-fund it so I wouldn't have to feel like anybody thought I owed them anything. But as I would drive through some of the areas where I'd been a policeman 30 years ago, it looked like time had stood still. Not a thing had been improved. There might have been big changes in underground stormwater drainage, but there was really no improvement from the street level up. So I would hear the city say, we've invested $500 million in Lake Bradford. And I'd go down there, and again, it's underwater stormwater drainage. An important thing, but not something that necessarily increases the quality of life. I think we've all known that we have had the highest per capita crime rate in the state. But a lot of people don't know we have the poorest zip code in the entire state. Not Tampa, not Miami, but right here in Tallahassee, the poorest zip code. And I got more and more frustrated that everybody talked about wanting to change it, but nobody wanted to do anything. And then one of the straws that broke my back was I'm the chairman at John Paul II Catholic High School. And we've got several kids there that are from the Bond area. We've got sort of a motto that if a kid wants to go to school there and the family wants to go there, we will find a way to pay for it. And so as a result, we've got a fair number of kids from some of our more poor neighborhoods. And we had one child coming there who was on my son's football team. Turned out he only had 2 pairs of clothes, and they couldn't afford to wash them every other day. And he was having to wear dirty clothes to school. We found that out the coach started doing his laundry for him every day, but we made sure he had clothes to wear. But I thought, this is unacceptable. 1 mile from downtown, we have good children who can't afford the basic necessities of life. And then we had another football teammate of my son who comes to school talking about needing to shuffle all of his siblings into the back room of their house because there's gunfire out front. And I just decided someone's got to do anything. The fellow I ran against came along and said he was going to fix that sort of stuff. He was going to focus on that. But it's my opinion that in 3 years, he hasn't focused on it a bit other than lip service. He's been too busy. I think his leadership style doesn't lend itself to making compromises, building bridges, getting teamwork together to work on the things on the South Side. And as a result, he just fights over things in other places in the city. And the South Side is not getting better. The South Side needs, and when I say South Side, I just mean in general, sort of our impoverished areas, high crime areas. They need somebody who's willing to adopt that area and say, this is my job in life, is to make the quality of life better here, to give people jobs, to end poverty, and to end crime. And that's maybe longer than you needed, but that's what made me decide to run.
No, that's enough. I mean, I've been around this game, if you will, long enough, and I understand the way government works, and it's it's pretty easy to kind of sit back and throw rocks at the building, which our democracy needs that. Our democracy needs those folks who are out there throwing rocks at the building, who are saying that you're not listening to us. That's what the First Amendment is about, and et cetera. But when you become an elected official, it's a little different, and sometimes I think we do elect leaders that are doing the latter, and they are, they're not actually making progress or developing the relationships that they need to move things forward. Now, tell me, what do you see yourself doing differently to kind of move Tallahassee forward as compared to your opponent?
Well, I think Tallahassee is doing fine, except for our impoverished areas. So the way you move the whole city forward is, first step, you've got to make those areas better. You cannot move the city any farther forward carrying the moniker of the highest crime rate in the state and the poorest zip code in the state. So it all starts by investing in these areas. The first thing you do is you go down and make sure that the people in these areas are getting the same level of city services as everyone else. There's neighborhoods in our impoverished area with lots where it's okay just to throw a bag of garbage, and it becomes a de facto garbage dump. And the city doesn't go down and pick it up. The residents don't complain about it. And you wonder if a child growing up seeing that thinks that's normal. It is time to go down there, clean all of that up, make sure every light pole works, make sure every city-owned lot is cleaned up, make sure every abandoned house that is owned by an absentee landlord gets in compliance with code, cleans up the yard. You've got to change the quality of where people live. I think the next thing you've got to do is you've got to provide jobs. And I mean good jobs, career jobs, not more McDonald's, not more gas stations. We have about 12 corporations that have Tallahassee on the top 5 city lists and are thinking of coming here. And these are corporations that may want to be at Innovation Park, the airport, places where there are not heritage oak trees we need to cut down, places where our unemployed folks live. It's the perfect mix, and we've got to be willing to accept those corporations if they pick Tallahassee to come to. I'm not talking about putting a coal plant on Park Avenue, but if somebody wants to build at the airport and employ people from 32304, we've got to do what it takes to get those companies to come here. And I think the fellow I'm running against would be opposed to that. And the last thing is crime. Crime involves working with the community to find out how they would like the police officers to act in their community, and then standing by that community when outside agitators come in to try to disrupt that relationship. But I think the most important thing about crime is that if you fix poverty, crime will go away on its own. They are the two evil sides of the same coin. And just by policing neighborhoods the way they would like to be policed while you're working on poverty and the quality of the infrastructure and the quality of the neighborhoods, the crime will take care of itself.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you talk about crime, because what you make me think about is a conversation I had with a gentleman a few weeks ago. He's a psychiatrist here in town, and his job is to kind of do the assessments of those individuals who are one of our inner law enforcement. And what he shared with me is that the number of individuals that are passing that assessment has decreased tremendously, over the number over recent years. What he shared with me in saying that is that good people, whom perhaps wanted to be policemen 20, 30 years ago, they don't want to be policemen anymore because of what certain sectors of the community, have done to kind of, I guess, lack of a better word, bastardize policing itself. And so what's happening is that we're not getting good people wanting to go into policing anymore. And also there's a woman that does a lot of work with me and for me. She's a former police person in the Maryland area. And she shared with me that they were doing the thing at one time where policemen were living in the neighborhoods. That was something that particular police department decided to do. And they saw that as a way of dealing with those issues in terms of the relationship between the police department and the community. While you as a city commissioner would obviously not be a policeman, but coming from that background, how do you think you could kind of guide the efforts to improve crime and just the relationships that our law enforcement have with the communities from that position?
One of my biggest problems I have with how things are done, noticing this back when I was a policeman, are we would have these high visibility squads or the community policing squads. But because they were there to do the community policing, they were usually working during the day or the afternoon, meeting the neighbors, working with the neighbors, but they may not be there when the sun went down and some of the criminal behavior came out. So while you may have a squad that worked for weeks developing a rapport with the neighborhood, at 3 in the morning when something bad comes up, it's police officers who don't know the neighbors and the neighbors don't know the police officers. I think two of the things we can do is start meeting with the neighborhoods on a smaller basis, not entire sections of the city, but on a neighborhood basis, and then ask, what do you want from the police? What do you expect? What would you like to see? And then I think we could maybe do a better job of trying to get the officers who are actually answering the calls at 3 in the morning to, at another time, get to meet the citizens that they work with ahead of time. So we may need to take a midnight squad and put them on day shift for a month, where their only job is to go meet and greet in the neighborhoods where they work. And then when they go back to midnight shift, when something happens, they'll know those community members. Okay. It's kind of like the living down there. The whole point of living down in those areas was to get to know the citizens. So they were your neighbors, they were your friends. You knew who to call when you had a problem. I think an extension of that is getting the policemen who are actually handling the calls to get to know ahead of time, when things are good, the citizens they work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. You kind of make me think about, gosh, when I was growing up in a little town called Bartow, Florida, I had a cousin actually that was a policeman, back then it was a kind of a big deal. I'm talking about the 60s here. It was a big deal for a black guy to be on the police department, And it really, it meant a lot to the community, in fact, I remember, in the early 80s, I lived in San Diego, and my dad tried to talk me into joining the police department at that time because the police department was hiring, and it was a job that a lot of folks wanted to get engaged in because it was a good way to serve the community. Now, on the subject of the South Side, and economic development, how what do you think that we done wrong, and what can we do right or better?
Well, I think one of the things we've done wrong is not embracing people that want to bring jobs to the south side of town. We had the Honda Jet Company years ago wanted to put their factory to build the planes at the Tallahassee airport. There was nothing to cut down but man-planted pine trees, no heritage oaks. It was nobody's neighborhood, nobody's living out there. And they wanted to put a factory there. Now, I understand they would have probably brought a lot of out-of-town workers, but there would have been a lot of jobs for Tallahasseans right in the very zip code that has the highest level of poverty. But to get those companies, as much as it all sickens us, you've got to be willing to give some stuff up to give them. You've got to be willing to give them maybe a break on their utilities for a few years, maybe give them a break on their permitting or preferential permitting. And we all hate doing it because it feels like corporate welfare. But if you remove the emotion from it and put the numbers on a piece of paper and start figuring out what is the return on that investment for helping that company come here by employing 20 to 40 people in our highest unemployed area or poorest area, they become successful people. They start paying their utility bill instead of needing help paying it. All of a sudden, the whole city is doing better. So we've got to be willing to embrace these clean companies that want to come here. Again, I'm not talking about putting a coal burning plant on Adams Street. I'm talking about clean corporations, things like Danforth Timber Corps that are already there, that do well, that are good neighbors. I think the other thing we've got to do is do a better job of making sure that our CRA money gets to the businesses that need it. There is some level of pre-planning that needs to be done to get CRA money. I haven't gone through it myself, but I'm told one thing is you need a multi-year business plan to show that the CRA's investment in you will pay off, and it's just not a handout. Well, if you're able to put together a 2 to 5 year business plan on paper, there's a good chance you've got enough resources that you don't need the CRA money. We've got to do a better job of going to the businesses that we know have been there forever, that might be struggling, and saying, hey, we may have money for you. What do you envision doing with your business? And then we need to help them get in contact with people like Keith Bowers to say, we need to help this company with their application. Because right now, what I worry happens is we get businesses that don't really need the money, that have a lobbyist or a lawyer or an accountant that says, hey, CRA is handing out free money for what you're already doing. You might as well go down there and get some of it. I know that's an oversimplification of it, but we've got to turn it the other way around to where we go find the people that truly need it and then help them apply for it. I think those are two of the biggest things we've done wrong. We haven't helped get the CRA money to the people that's really needing the help. I don't think we've embraced businesses that want to employ people in the 32304 area, because while we have many people that say they want to help the poor, what they really mean is they want to help their poor as long as it takes absolutely no skin off their back. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to welcome some people that bring business to town to employ our people living in poverty. I think the other thing we've done badly is we have just let the quality of life, the crime, our attention to the infrastructure, our attention to the streets, it has been on the back burner or a taboo subject for too long. And we have got to improve the basic appearance and quality of life on the south side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I guess I'll get on my soapbox here for maybe 30 seconds or so, and I'll just say that all my life I've heard of well-meaning people who say they want to help the poor, but when there are good jobs that the poor want, it could be in Amazon or it could be a variety of things. They would criticize that business being there for jobs that they would never have to apply for, because in some cases they're highly educated and in wealth of themselves. I mean, so it's really kind of mind-boggling to me. Now, on kind of on that subject, this particular campaign seems like there's a focus on who's raising money and where the money is coming from, and and all this. And what I'll tell you is, I know that campaigns cost money, and I know that folks who support candidates donate money. Those who have the resources to do so. What's your sense of this conversation with respect to your campaign?
Well, it turns out that we have a similar number of donors. So we're each doing, getting money from a similar number of people. And admittedly, mine are giving a lot more. I don't know if that shows more enthusiasm for me. Does that show more assets for the people that are giving? But the nice thing for me is that I haven't promised anything to anybody. I think he has been such a polarizing person that has been ineffectual in leadership and really doesn't have anything to show for 3 years up there, that many folks who follow this don't think he should have another chance. And many of these are people that gave to him the first time. And that's making it incredibly easy for me to raise money, because I don't have to make any wheeling or dealing. I just say, hey, I'm running against him. I think I can do a better job. I'll be honest, I'll be fair, and I'll work hard. And people are willing to support me. Folks, he likes to portray me as the Chambers candidate, like we picked me. Well, nobody picked me. I decided to do this on my own, and I made the first call. But I would say, of course, the Chamber supports me. That fellow attacked him. Who does he think they're going to support? It probably wouldn't matter who was running against Jeremy. The Chamber would probably support them. And the same goes for some of these big businessmen. Yeah, a fellow I'm running against made a video and put it on YouTube saying, I'm coming for you, so-and-so. I'm coming for you, so-and-so. And now he acts shocked and amazed that these folks have decided to support me. That's a bed that he made that he's now got to lie in, all the while claiming it proves that I'm the bad guy. That's really a row he made that he's got to hoe, and it's working out well for me. But the nice thing is it's making it very easy to raise money without promising anything to anybody other than I'll do my best.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I can look directly in the camera on this. I'm never good at this, but I will say to those who are watching this is that both candidates in this race are good people. They have a different view about how they would approach governing on the dais of the city commission. And I think both people love Tallahassee. So I don't think that this should be an election where anyone is looked at as he's this terrible person or what have you. But then again, I'm not naive, and I know that politics can go that way. But these are two good people who are running for office, and the voters will certainly decide. Now, now with that said, regarding economic development, and the things that we just talked about, how do you think how would your approach overall be different from your opponents?
Well, first off, I agree. I don't have a personal problem with him. I actually voted for him the first time around. I've just come to think that he's not getting done what I thought he said he would get done. I think the main thing I would bring is attention to the fire. I am less concerned with many of the things that he has gotten overly involved with you can only invest so much time in certain things, and my time is going to be invested where I think it's needed the most, our poorest area and our most crime-ridden area. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is that is going to be my focus. The other thing, though, is you've just got to have an attitude of civility. You've got to be able to get along people. You've got to be able to work with people that you may not like. You've got to be able to work with people you don't agree with. You can't just refuse to call them back because you disagree with them. You may need some help from them in the future. You can't pick a fight with someone for no good reason and then 3 months later call them and say, hey, I need your help on this project. One thing I hear probably once a year from a different patient that comes through my office, one of the more old-time Tallahassee folks who had to deal with my mom and didn't get their way, they'll say, and I hear this once a year, you know, I had a meeting with your mom and I didn't get anything I wanted out of it, but I left that meeting liking her, respecting her, and being willing to work with her again. And we have got to get back to that. We have got to get back to where we respect each other and treat each other well. It's the only way to make progress with people you disagree with. It's the only way to make progress with the people you disagree with. And that would be the main thing I would approach it as. I think, I don't think we should have given 27 million, actually 20, even 7 million is the cost of the money. I don't think we should have given that money to FSU. I think somebody with better leadership skills could have gone down there and worked out a compromise. It would have taken getting onto it earlier. We should have gotten onto this a year ago, not at the third meeting at Blueprint. But I think somebody got onto it earlier could have changed that. Maybe change it to 10 million like FAMU got. Maybe get something in return. The med school's always looking for clinical sites to treat people because they don't have their own clinic. They may now actually on South Monroe, but they're still looking for clinical sites. We could have said, hey, in exchange for the money, we need you to call the medical school and get them to promise to staff clinics that we will build on the south side of town. So I think it's all about how you approach problems, and you've got to approach them in a way that people want to work with you.
Okay, now I'm glad you. Yeah, something happened there.
Back.
Are you there?
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, I'm not sure what happened there, but what I was going to ask, you know, speaking of that issue, you know, that is going to be a big issue, you know, in this particular you know, election, you know, the issue of those dollars that went to Florida State University, you know, and you know, and I think you mentioned that you would have liked to have seen some negotiations, et cetera. Can you share with the audience, had you been in a position to have those negotiations, what kind of things that what you would have thought about doing or discussing?
So there's a few things. One of the easiest ones is if people, I think, had got onto it early, maybe at the first or the second meeting, I think it would have been very easy to get it to $10 million, which was the same amount FAMU got. I think that would have been a lot more palatable to the city. But maybe there's stuff we could get from FSU. I don't know what part of this came through earlier, but the medical school is always looking for clinical sites to treat people. They don't really have their own clinic for the med school. They may have built something like that on South Adams Street, but I still think they're looking for clinical sites to treat people. Not only that, we've got a psychiatry residency coming that will probably have about 6 doctors in it, plus 3 or 4 supervising doctors. I think there would have been a great opportunity to say, you know what, if we're going to give you this money, we need you to call the med school and get them to commit to doing their clinical time on the south side of town where it's most needed. And the city will provide you clinics to do it. I mean, all a clinic nowadays needs is an ability to draw labs in a building. I think we could have easily gotten something for that $20 million. But I think somebody that had attacked it early with a plan before the train had left the station could have definitely changed that. Instead, I think, again, because I don't really agree with the way he negotiates, we ended up with a hostile workplace complaint and might end up with a hostile workplace lawsuit out of it. I think that's that's not helping things. That's not, it's actually making stuff worse. So I think that being willing to negotiate for less money or something in return could have been successful if it implemented early.
Yeah. Now, and Leon County, Tallahassee, not unlike, frankly, most places in the country right now, we're dealing with these issues of affordable housing and doubling of rents and and things of that nature. What do you think? Someone who's in the position of a city commission, what could you do about any of that, if anything, frankly? Oh, can you hear me?
Michael, I lost you there. You back?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, you're back. I hear you. Yeah, I got you.
Okay, I'm not sure if you heard my question, but I'll repeat about what I was saying is, regarding this issue of high rent and just issues of having affordable housing that a lot of municipalities are experiencing around the country. How can a city commission approach these things to provide some type of a comfort, if you will, or avenues for citizens to have a place to live?
So right now, to build, if we were to take let's take a place off of, I'm just gonna make up something off of Lake Bradford Road where we can put 10 to 20 houses. Probably by the time we buy those lots, we will have $50,000 invested in each lot. Now we'll try to start permitting it. It will take anywhere from a year to 4 years to get it permitted the way the city works. So let's say it takes 3 years to get it permitted. Now, before we can start, we have to put in roads and infrastructure. Now we're up to another $60,000 per lot. So we're at $110,000 in 3 years, and we haven't even broke ground on the house. Now, if we want to build a reasonable 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, it's probably going to cost at least $130,000 to $150,000. So if you take that 110 we were already at and add another 150, you're back into unaffordable housing. Housing should cost less than a third of your monthly income. And when you get houses that expensive, it's not going to happen. Also, I don't think you'll ever find developers who are willing to go into that project knowing that they'll make a smaller profit and not knowing how long is it going to take to permit it and how expensive is it going to be to permit it. I think one way to fix that is to have the city provide the land, and we could do it through existing land or swapping some of the land we have downtown. And then the city can permit for what they want built, because the city can do it at cost. Then the city can put in the neighborhood roads, and the city can put in the plumbing and water, and then bid it out to developers and say, we want this kind of house built. It's already permitted. You got to build it the way we permitted it. And I need you to build it for this much, and you're allowed this portion of profit. Make it a black and white deal for the developer for a known amount of profit for them. And I think they'll come in and build houses that may actually cost $150,000. Now you're talking affordable houses. But
Okay.
150 plus 110, was that 260 just to get off the ground? That's not affordable.
So the city needs to what you're saying, that the city needs to kind of look inside of itself and to try to figure out, what it could do, in terms of, its permitting and et cetera, to make it more pliable, if you will, for developers who, frankly, they probably would like to. Some people may think they don't, but I think many do, as good citizens, want to provide affordable housing. So this is something that the city could really look inside of themselves and do, is what you're suggesting.
I think so, but I think if you ask them to buy the lot and then sit on it for 2 to 4 years getting it permitted, That's, that's money getting lost every month. If we got the lots prepped and permitted and just expected them to build at cost with a small built-in profit, I think you could build some houses that were very affordable. Even if the people choose to rent them, we can still make them affordable. But again, 260 as your cheapest house is already too expensive for the folks that we need to help. That is not affordable housing. That's more than probably 2/3 your monthly income to pay for that.
Okay, and what I'm hearing is, from you is, these are things that local government can do, but a lot of it is frankly, it's out of local government hands. There are things that state government can do, and there's things that federal government can do, and there's the Housing Finance Corporation, and there's a whole bunch of other things, that the city frankly, has no control over. But the city can, there's some small things that the city can do that make a big difference. Now, in this particular, campaign, from what I've been kind of reading and a lot of people have been reading about, it's almost like a local kind of culture war, if you will, because there's this, there's the so-called the business folks, the developers, or the rich folks, lack of a better term, and then there's the other folks. And there's this idea that the rich want to keep everyone down, and all the problems are because of those who are wealthier and who are doing well. And you've been kind of, I mean, I know it's going to be a hard question, but you've been kind of lumped into that. What say you about that whole discussion? I mean,
when I talk to somebody who's, say, more conservative, more wealthy, maybe doesn't want their money spent in our impoverished area, I try to tell them, listen, you're not sending your money away to Seattle. You're not sending your money away to Houston. This is going 5 miles down the road in your own city. I tell them you should do it out of the goodness of your heart, but if you're not going to, do it because it's good business. Tallahassee's as good as it's going to be with the highest crime rate and the poorest zip code. If these folks want their businesses to raise in value, if they want their property to raise in value, if they want their city to get better, it is imperative that they invest in the south side of town. And I've got to say, some of the relatively unsympathetic folks in town, even when I tell them that, many of them seem to get it. You cannot be a healthy city and have the poorest area in the state and the highest crime in the state. You just can't do it. And if they want the city to get better, then we've all got to buckle in. And I think also making it a point that this is not your money getting sent off out of town. This is you investing in your own city 5 miles down the street. And a lot of people can buy into that. Even folks that, sort of the folks you're implying that traditionally might not. A lot of folks buy into that.
Well, I mean, I moved to Tallahassee in 1989. I moved here from Tampa. I was going to get an MBA, and I was going to go back to Tampa or San Diego, someplace where I've lived before. But I ended up getting involved in the political process and all that, and ended up staying here. And what I can tell you is that when I look at the south side of town, it doesn't look a lot different than it did in 1989 when I moved here. And why do you think that is?
I don't think we have invested in that area. I think that the majority of Tallahasseans, the grand majority that live on the north side of town, have no idea where Saxon Street is. They have no idea where Keith Street is. Poverty in our crime area is more of a rhetorical idea to them. They haven't seen firsthand what it really means. And I think it's easy to say, well, yeah, we've got, a bad area of town, but who doesn't? I don't think they get it. That's not okay. It's not every town has to have that. And you need to go see what you're talking about. I think another problem is, again, I think we have a large group of people who are fairly vocal, who say they want to help the poor and claim that helping the poor is what we need to do, but they really want to help the poor only if it means not changing a thing about Tallahassee.
Mm.
We can't let a single corporation come here. And I don't want to see Tallahassee change, but if Tallahassee has to change a little bit to make sure children eat, then sign me up for changing a little bit. Let's just do it smart. But I think people have been unwilling to do the things it takes to make those areas better, because it sounds good to say we want to make it better, but it takes effort and sacrifice to do it. And it's just been easier to turn the other cheek. Again, I think most people in Tallahassee don't ever find themselves down there. Many of them, if from these nicer part of town, if they leave the airport, they drive around Capitol Circle to avoid going down Lake Bradford. So I think there's a lot of apathy and unawareness of what poverty really means and how poverty is really expressed in Tallahassee. And because of that, I agree. I go down in some of the areas of town, it is the spitting image of 30 years ago when I was a policeman. Just about the only exception might be Macomb Street in Frenchtown. 1010 North Macomb Street has been fixed up to some nice apartments or condos. Much of the 400 block of Macomb Street. The only problem is it's also lost a lot of what it used to be. It's now a lot of college housing. It's not the same. But barring Virginia Street, Carolina Street, Georgia Street, Macomb Street, in that area, I'd say every place I policed looks exactly the same as it did back then. And that's just not okay.
You know what? I do have a question. I just it's kind of come to my mind. You have a pretty interesting background. You come from a family of of service. You've been a police officer. You're an orthopedic surgeon. And I'm just curious. In those roles, law enforcement, and then later orthopedic surgeon, can you share, what have you seen in both of those roles in dealing with the public, with people from all walks of life? That it's kind of informed you in terms of your passion to run for office and your understanding of people in the community.
A lot of it actually comes from my time as a policeman, seeing true suffering. I mean, suffering is seen quite often at the hospital, but it's a lot different when everything's cleaned up and you've got clean sheets. And when you see the suffering in some of our impoverished areas, that is what really led me to think that one day I've got to do something more than just pay my taxes. I've got to do something. And I think the main time was, I grew up middle upper class. I thought poverty meant you couldn't afford an Atari. I had no idea that poverty meant you couldn't afford clothes and food. It just wasn't in my realm of understanding. And one time I was working at 2502 Holden Street, and I saw 3 kids playing. They're about 7, 8 years old, and they're having the time of their life. And I remember thinking, man, I remember those carefree days. I miss those carefree days. They're having a good time. And then I looked a little more closely. 2 of them were throwing a football that only had 3 sides of the pigskin. It was a flat, flabby football. And one kid was riding a big wheel that had no wheels on the back. It's just scooting the back along. But these kids are having the time of their life. And that was the first time it really hit me that every kid starts out the same in what they want and what they desire and what their dreams are. But the starting line we start from is not the same. No kid, regardless of where they are, dreams of growing up and living in poverty. But I started to worry that if I couldn't comprehend success because if I couldn't comprehend poverty because I'd never experienced it, can any of these children comprehend success if that's all they know, that there's more out there? And that's kind of when I started thinking, someday I am going to do what I can to help fix this. There's this great quote from, I think it was Einstein. I read in some book of quotes. But he said, it's good to be a person, a man of success, but it's more important to be a man of value. And thinking of those kids down there, that's what's got me doing this. That's what's making me think of the public service. Growing up in the house of the mayor, you saw public service was a way of life. When you're a doctor, public service is just part of what you do, covering the emergency room for free, taking care of the homeless, knowing you won't get paid for it. But there's something about seeing those kids and realizing the disparity of the starting point with all kids that are exactly the same on the inside made me think that one day I'd like to do more than just vote and pay my taxes.
Mhm. That's kind of that's interesting. What it sounds like is that all those experiences kind of shaped a worldview that probably giving you some compassion to serve. I'm going to ask you, what would people be surprised to know about you?
I think people are usually surprised to hear my ideas for social financial justice. People see a white guy who's pretty well off, who was raised by a doctor and just assumes I am out for everything I can get for myself. And when I talk to people, they're usually a little disarmed that uh, my goal right now in life is to improve things for the poor. It doesn't need to be that way. I think that would surprise people more than anything. There's just this, partly because the fellow I'm running against is trying to portray me as that, but I understand I am a well-off rich guy, and a lot of people just have preconceived conceptions. You shouldn't read a book by its cover, but a lot of times you can. Well, let me tell you, in my case, you can't. I think that's what surprises people the most when they get to know me.
Mhm. Okay, now I'm going to ask maybe one or two more questions, but what I want to ask kind of go back to something you talked about earlier, and I think about the phrase of lifting all boats, and that is when we talk about the lower social economic parts of town and the more wealthy parts of town, and trying to make the case, that it's a benefit to all when we lift up all boats. For instance, when we talk about where our airport is and folks who come into town for business and et cetera, they want to come down that corridor and what they see and businesses that want to that may want to move here, and they want to know that they could that their employees can get decent airplane flight rates when they're in and out of town, and they want to know that if they're an entrepreneur, that if their business failed, they don't have to pick up their family and move someplace else, that they can go to the next corner and do something else. I mean, how do we how do we communicate that idea of lifting all boats and really that kind of a big grand scheme of a plan of what Tallahassee could really be with these two universities and community college and percentage of folks with advanced degrees and et cetera, to keep them and to have them stay. How do you communicate that to people?
Well, I think one thing you can do is go to somebody who thinks life is pretty good in Tallahassee. Go to somebody in the Northeast and say, what do you want from Tallahassee? And a lot of them say, oh, I want better restaurants. I want more of a nightlife. I want more, you name it. And I want to say, well, you know what? You can't have that if you've got the highest crime rate and the poorest zip code. I think that's how you start convincing people that this is where that tide comes that will raise everybody. If you fix those problems, you will start seeing the rest of the city get better. Suddenly more companies want to come to town to employ people. Suddenly restaurants we've wanted might want to come to town. But as long as when the first thing somebody Googles on a computer to think about Tallahassee is our crime rate and our poverty rate, you can't grow like that. I think you're right. We've got to figure out a way to convince graduates from FAMU, FSU, TCC to stay here. There is a feeling that, man, I need to leave here so there's some diversity. So if I don't like one job, I can move to a similar one. Tallahassee, a lot of it's one or none. They're working on a incubator, I think, out at Innovation Park that will try to encourage those folks to stay here, because those are the folks that will drive future developments. Those are the ones that will build the new buildings and build the new businesses that will end up employing the people that need jobs. So you're right, we got to find a way to convince people to stay here. And while I admit convincing people to stay isn't really my passion, again, that's more the poor and the poverty. I do think that the city is starting to focus on that through this incubator with FSU to keep our high level educated folks to stay in town.
Okay, thank you.
But along those lines, just what, one example I've got is the hospital found a high-end HR manager that they wanted to hire as the vice president of human resources. He wanted the job. He comes home one day and his wife says, "We're not moving to that job." And he said, "Why? What's wrong with the hospital?" She said, "The hospital's great." When I Googled it, the first 5 searches either talked about the crime rate or the poverty. We're not moving to Tallahassee. That is not a way to get your city to grow in a good way.
Mm-hmm. But I'm going to end, I guess I'll end this by kind of talking about something that's happening today. That's not in Tallahassee, but it's in Florida. And I'm sure a lot of folks have been kind of glued to the television the last couple of days, watching Miss Jackson under she having to put up with some pretty bizarre grilling in the U.S. Senate, as she's on the cusp of becoming the first African-American woman to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. And she talked about her brother, who became a police officer in I think in Maryland, but they're from she grew up in Miami. Their family's from Miami, and her brother went to Howard University, and she just kind of talked about her parents and what they went through, and I lived in. I'm older than you are, so I do remember having to go through the back door of a restaurant on Highway 60 in Mulberry, Florida. And I look at all that, and then we have a vice president who's also a graduate of an HBCU, the same HBCU, Howard University, and and then we were in this town and we have a large HBCU, Florida A&M University, one of the top in the nation. Have you thought about how we could, could really leverage those universities, and Florida A&M University, and the place that, frankly, I think it is now. That it's, at the pinnacle that it is now, that it's a place that has never been in the history of our country, in terms of what we see as HBCUs. I don't know if there's anything extra that the city could do, but do you have any thoughts about, how can we leverage these universities together to make Tallahassee a lot better?
I think we do a good job with FSU. I think FAMU, we probably could do more. I'm not sure what FAMU would say they would need. I would sit down with them, but I think if they want to have a festival, a cultural festival, some sort of event, we need to go over backwards to help encourage that, because it all just brings good, positive attention to the university. I think investing money in the stadium for FAMU was a fantastic idea. As I'm told, it was close to maybe being condemned, and they didn't have the money to fix it. My bet is if we didn't fix it, FAMU would have taken its season to Orlando that year, maybe Jacksonville, and I don't think they'd ever come back. So we've got to do whatever we can to keep the athletics the focus here. I think the city should do whatever it takes to publicize how great our universities are, because that's what gets the young, smart people to come that will hopefully end up staying. Not that the ones that don't go to school aren't smart, but the point is folks that want to get an education if they come here and then we can convince them to stay, it helps our city. I'll never forget this Burger King commercial when I was in high school. And I want to say it used the Grambling marching band, but they were trying to show an example of a HBCU marching band that was doing sort of the dancing as they do the show. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. FAMU started that. That should be FAMU on this ad.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it takes to help FAMU with the branding to, you know, I love Howard, but I can't wait to start hearing all these famous people saying I went to FAMU, not went to Howard. And I think we could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I think for a while, FAMU is becoming that. I mean, the football team winning national championships. I think whatever it takes to help spread that name, we should do. I think FSU's name's getting spread fine, but it'd be nice to make FAMU more of a destination college to go to.
Yeah. I agree. And like I said, it just, as an African-American, this is just, these last couple of days has been pretty interesting. To say the least, and we got a great country, and the greatness of it is that you're running for office, there's two good guys who are running for office, and your slogan is I think it's progress,
because progress matters.
Exactly. And I, again, I'll tell anybody that you and I met some time ago, and I, and we spent a lot of time together, this organization, the Dream Foundation, PAC, we have not made any type of formal endorsements of this particular campaign at this time, and we'll hopefully we'll be talking to other candidates who are running for office, over the next month or so, and we do other things in which we help candidates, I'm sure we'll be finding ways to to perhaps help you and others as we move along, I can't help but just kind of thank you for your service and what you're doing, well,
thank you.
It just takes a lot of guts to to get out there and run for office.
Well, thanks.
Now, is there anything that you want to say to the voters before we end? And actually let them know how they can contact you. It's probably an important thing.
Well, I think the main thing is we've got to start voting for leaders who do what they say they're gonna do. We have got to stop allowing people to make these talking bullet points and then not deliver. And that's why my slogan is because progress matters. It is time to quit talking. It's time to make progress. Let's make some changes in our areas of town that need help. And if we made the wrong one, then we'll change it again. Let's start making some new mistakes and quit making the same ones over and over again. If you're happy with a lot of talk and not really changing things, then I think you should vote for it. But if you want someone who's going to look at our impoverished and crime-ridden areas and say, this is my job, then I'm the guy to do it. And again, because progress matters. And go Judge Jackson. I tried to listen to her interview yesterday, but in between surgeries, but every time I turned on the TV, it was nothing but the senators talking. I don't know if they ever gave her a chance to respond.
Well, gosh, that's a whole other story. I mean, I don't know if you've seen our buddy Lindsey Graham. That was pretty interesting.
I know it's. I tell you this. I think we have got to get away from these two political extremes, or you're either far right or you're far left, or if you're not, you're pandering to them because you're afraid of not getting reelected. I think that's what leads to stuff like this. The things our Supreme Court justices have to go through to get confirmed. Listen, there's no doubt that Judge Jackson is qualified. I mean, quit messing around and confirm her. You may not like what she agrees with, but you can't say she's not qualified to go back and forth. And same with Amy Coney Barrett. I mean, you may not like what they do. We've got to get back. I mean, there was a time when actually both parties would vote for the same Supreme Court justice. It's hard to believe that now. Now you hope just to get one or two crossovers. I doubt the justices have changed. Our view of extreme partisanism and fear of not getting reelected has taken over. And we've got to get back to doing the right thing for the people, not the right thing for the party, regardless of which party that is.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned, and I'll just say this, since we're kind of discussing this, I mean, completely off the topic with your campaign, but I been a little annoyed that the conversation has been about whether or not she's qualified, as if, as an African American, that needs to be the big thing to discuss, or the big question as to whether or not she's qualified. The discussion should be about perhaps her judicial temperament.
We lost you again.
Perhaps her interpretation of the law, and not getting into the policy area, and not crafting a law, as a judge, and etc. But why is it that there's this question about whether or not she's qualified? I can't think of a time in recent history where someone has been up for that position that the main question or concern was about whether or not they were qualified. Because you don't get to where she's gotten without being qualified. As an African American, I tell you, I've learned a long time ago, when I was a kid, I was told that you had to work harder and you had to be better qualified, just to be even. And she understood that, and she did the work, and so that means that she's probably more qualified than anybody else that ever sat in front of that Senate committee. So while we we celebrate how far we've come, there's some things that we still need to think about when we look in the mirror about how we look at each other.
And I agree. And to know that this is what, her third confirmation. I mean, she at least got confirmed as an appellate judge. And I think before that, she's been confirmed 2 or 3 times already. And a lot of these people, I think, voted for her. And now all of a sudden there's concern over her ability to do it. And really, it's just, you're concerned over her opinions. And you know what? I guess Obama put it back. Elections have consequences. Right now, there's a Democratic president who gets to pick who he wants, and there's a Democratic Senate that gets to confirm it. That's how it goes. You don't get to pick otherwise. And I think it's time that we try to get back to doing what's right, maybe not doing what's popular to your extreme voters.
Right, and
on both sides. I think both sides are guilty of that. Right,
and gosh, I was going to try to end this interview, but you just made me think of something else. In this particular race and what's happening in Tallahassee right now, and frankly, a lot of it is on a backdrop of the whole Scott Maddox, Paige Carter Smith, JT, and all that mess that happened. So there's this sense that, well, if if someone is pro-business, or if someone is supported by business, that means there's some type of a corruption, and we hate business folks, or we hate wealthy folks, and all that. I don't know if there's anything that can be done to change anybody's view or feelings, about any of that. But if you would have anything to say to that concern, what would it be?
I think one thing that would help with a lot of that is absolute painful transparency. Every public records search or every public records request should be answered in a timely manner, maybe even paid for unless it's expensive. Lobbyists should be registered. We know what lobbying is. They should register. The ethics board should have authority over a city commissioner whenever they're doing something as a city commissioner, including serving on other boards where your only qualification to be on that board is that you're a city commissioner. I think if we want to start earning the public's trust, we need to do what would typically maybe be some unnecessary measures to show transparency. And I think that it takes 1 minute to lose someone's trust and 5 years to get it back, but we need to start that 5 years now. And maybe it starts with painful transparency, transparency that might also almost be obtrusive, but it's the only way to earn back the public's trust, to let them know who's really making the decisions. All these texts, I mean, I've heard there's been several public records requests over some of these text messages that aren't being honored. That doesn't contribute to trust in the government and trust in the system.
Something you just said is frankly, I think you said it all when you said that apparently, but that the citizens have lost trust.
Yes.
In our government.
I think they've lost trust in their honesty, as you know, based from that last trial, and I think they've lost trust in their intentions. And I think the best you can do to prove them wrong, or unfortunately maybe right, is complete, full, painful transparency. Every meeting documented, every text turned over, every lobbyist registered. And once we earn the citizens' trust back, if there are things we went overboard, maybe we can take them away. But for now, overboard is what's needed.
Okay, well, thank you, David. All right, well, I guess we'll end. And now, how can people get in contact with you?
Well, and go to votebellamy.com if they want to go to the website. The easiest way, I'd rather you just give me a call if you got a question, 850-688-5285. I'm happy to talk with just about anyone, anywhere, anytime. So please give me a call if you got any questions.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much, David. You and I will be talking, I'm sure, and good luck.
All right. Well, thank you.
And I know it's going to be a lot of hard work, and you are juggling a lot of balls there. I mean, so because you got a day job.
A previous general surgery intern can always squeeze a few more hours out of the day.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, David. And I guess that's it. And thanks for all those folks who are watching.
Thank you.
Okay.